Welcome, everybody, to Flat Earth Nation. Mud Flood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. I do have to warn you right up front, it seems like I have a sketchy internet connection tonight. It showed up there after a couple of seconds. So I think we'll be able to at least get started. There's Luther saying hello to Scotty, and I'm saying hello to Scotty too. Glad to see you guys here. Very interesting choice of a title tonight. Two types of Gnostics, because there you're either having knowledge hidden from you by all of the book burnings of this, like, hey, that's some good stuff. And then you hear about, they burned down this library. They burned every single one of his books. You could be burned at the stake for finding books, according to some people. And then there are the other people that are, so it's Gnostic, it's hidden knowledge, because that was their goal. And then there's other Gnostics burned that book. And we have to decide where we're going to be, with the knowledge that's revealed that was hidden. I'm going to try to be showing that the Kabbalah is only from 1908. And, how long does it take to change the thoughts of the world? Well, the gospel changed the world, turned it upside down in, I guess less than a full generation. And others could do the same. From the time I was a little boy until now, everything's changed. From the black and white TV to now we pretend we went to the moon, to we pay for our own tracking devices. So let's, and I put a link in. I'll put another one in there. If anybody has any comments that I went off again, saying having trouble connecting, please check my internet connection. Oh boy, takes 1001, 1002. 1002 seconds is how long it took me before that comment was posted and went back. I better just get with it and try to present, and the Lord will provide, and we'll get something done here. We're going to be looking how do ocean currents work? What is the global conveyor belt? So, we're going to be talking about that if we get back to it. What is thermohaline circulation? What is it? Oh, that looks like a pretty big picture. And I'd love to see what that looked like on a flat Earth map, wouldn't you? Thermohaline circulation. I'd love to see what it looks like on a flat Earth map. Here's your Benjamin Franklin. We'll just take a second and let this load with my slow stream and my cool green screen. And the people on God's team giving it time, because we know Ben Franklin Well, was he had something figured out, chart of the Gulf Stream. And they call it the Gulf Stream, I'm pretty sure, because it originates in the Gulf of Mexico, from what I understand now. It's like we had to let it load twice. Hey, look, I think this is cool too. It, kind of has the Gulf Stream up here, and then it takes it up to the Eskimos or Labrador, because they called that up here in Canada the land of the Eskimos. I guess Ben Franklin still liked his things in French. There's the land of the Eskimos, because, they had to get to that Great Lakes. They were, those things were open back then. Who were they trying to kid? I'm rolling down, man. So this is the Gulf Stream. They had this figured out. That's 2.5 minutes. That's 2 minutes. As it swings by Nantucket, I would say it's hitting its max speed and slowing down to 2 minutes here. So these ships here, they got to do a lot of tacking to move back and forth. That's how they do it. They're very tacky. It's a tacky situation. So it's supposed to, one of those, there's supposed to be 4 deep parts of the ocean, deep wells. We're going to be, if we have chance, we'll come back and look at that, because isn't that cool? Thermohaline circulation. That's what they say is all needed for their. Oh man, now it slips my mind after I could argue that all day and night. That thing that when it spins, the Coriolis effect. Look at what Bing has as its well, that's in what they call Egypt. That's a big picture right there. Hey, you ever hear about Eli's sons? Eli's worthless sons is how that's started off there. Verse 12 of 1 Samuel chapter 2. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. Roll that down here. Looks like, there's 8 people here, and it looks like we still having a little bit of we have some connection. Boy, it'd be interesting to talk to meteorologists and just kind of like, with what just like start asking them a question and have them like think about it and give you a straight answer. So let's get back to it here. That 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. The customs of the priests with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. That is what they did at Shiloh. Over before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let them burn the fat first and then take as much as you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now." and if not, I will take it by force. Thus, the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the men treated the offering of the Lord with contempt. And it did no good when Eli tried to rebuke his men because, well, they're worthless men and they did not know the Lord. And maybe Eli, the prophet, knew the Lord, but I don't think he feared the Lord enough. Verse 22, hearing all that his sons were doing in all Israel, and how they lay with women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all the people. No, my son, it is no good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. For it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. Yikesity doodah. It was the will of the Lord to put them to death. And people say that, they've searched the Bible and they can't find God's will. Well, it's all over. The Bible always says, well, here's God's will, there's God's will, here's God's will, there's God's will. In this particular instance, it was God's will to put them to death. Let's check it out. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to the morgue. The corpse goes to the morgue. A little bit of a slow here for me, but probably not enough for streaming, but hopefully it's still staying with it right now, because it desired to kill them. Hapus. He was delighted with Jacob. So it was his will, because he delighted. I guess we have to say he's doing it for our example, because I'm of the position that if God the Father is doing it, it is perfect. It is perfect. It could be no more perfect. In the long run, we will have everything explained to us, and no one is going to be able to argue with God of why did you do this or why did you do that. We're going to see that the God of love is also the God of, a jealous God for his own reputation, because he is perfect. Only he is wholly separate, and we are all created beings, because it says in Genesis 34:19, because he was delighted with Jacob's, and it was the will. Maybe we should run down to that and just see if, I see 1 Samuel 2:25 there at the bottom of the screen. Let me put down my coffee cup. And so it said it had pleased, it desired, because the Lord would slay, it desired to put him to death. It had pleased him. He was delighted. It was his will in the English Standard Version, one of the top 3 Bibles, in my opinion, right now that a Christian can use for daily study. Delights, delighted, favors. He had favoreth Joab. And this again is 29 times of the 75 total occurrences. It looks like a pretty solid root word, not getting too wild with it. Let's see what they say about it. Strong's Hebrew, looks like 2654. Uh-oh, slow in opening up. 1001, 1002. Better check and see if I'm still connect. I can still see it spiraling. Chafet. Compare in Arabic to that? How are they going to compare that? Oh, I guess I get it. I get it. That Arabic and the Aramaic are kind of similar. Kaffates. To delight in. Take pleasure in, delight in. A woman, a man, in matters and things, in accusative and implicit forms. You can direct your Are you kidding me, right? Exactly. Nothing's easy anymore. The show wasn't really cut so much as, the deal was it would not go on. I had to do a restart and add updates to my computer. That's the whole deal with that. So I know, right? And I see I had my phone on because I typed that message, and I didn't realize, what is there? Like a 15-second delay from, what I see, what I'm watching in the studio, and what you actually see coming offline there. But anyway, at least we're back running now. Doesn't seem that strong of a signal, but hey, that's from me. It was nice to hear Randy yesterday. It was things. I mean, it's crazy that it's fall. It's winter is coming. This is the first day I didn't have to run the dehumidifier here in the swamp they call the Texas Louisiana border. Let me put a link in here if anybody wants to come on and chat it up. I want to tie it into the two types of Gnostics. And I was just going over particularly, about, what was it, 5 or 6 minutes ago now. I was offline for quite a while. And if anybody wants to come on, we're going to be talking about Gnostics and whatever you want to do. We're going to be looking at this video. I found a gold mine of esoteric information. And I think that properly interpreted and looking at it as, because I am not satisfied at all with just the Protestant Catholic debate right now of like, oh, this is the way it's always been. And nobody really even knows what Gnostics are, because we've just been programmed to believe that, they're the absolute word, thank goodness the Roman Catholics, drawed and quartered and burned everybody at the stake and inquisitioned everybody because, based on what they want us to believe, the Gnostics were the most, to be feared group of people in the world because, even though Protestants aren't Catholics, they shook hands and said, yeah, we get it. You might have overreacted, but those Gnostics, whew, boy, we sure didn't want that stuck out, there in public. We had to hide it, hidden knowledge. They've hidden the good, and I think preserved the bad for their own, psyop. This is all a psyop. We're God's people, and things are being revealed or they're not. And I'm ready to go back to a Gnostic understanding if it matches the Bible, because I do know for a fact that many, and I don't know what percentage of the quote unquote Gnostics, the Cathars, the Bogomils, the Valdenese, the Huguenots, they didn't toe the line on the Trinity, and they paid for it with their lives. And now the last man standing was the killers of the Gnostics beating their chest, having the Protestants send their Billy Grahams and whoever it is at the time to kiss the ring of a now Jesuit Pope. And if you have carefully studied the Bible and you still come to the conclusion that Roman Catholic Christianity as presented today is, your brothers and sisters in Christ, then I question your salvation and your knowledge of the Bible. What would it take for you to say, that's too much? If you're going to say, well, they're just weaker brothers, they are ruled by elite pedophiles. And everybody that works for them knows they spend billions a year covering up their sexual shenanigans. And everybody that has half a brain that goes to church there knows they're serving under people that are covering up for homosexual pedophiles that spend billions of years covering it up. Now, if those are your brothers and sisters in Christ, what Bible verses are you reading that would justify that? What narrow road scriptures are you reading? What part of be ye separate? Come out of them. Don't millstone children. Don't fornicate outside of marriage. What part of the Bible is confusing for you? And yet they killed the Cathars, the Bogomils, the Valdamis, everybody else. You could all, remember different groups that others don't, but they killed them all. And now we've got Kabbalah everywhere presented, either outrightly for, sexy women like tantric sex, so go do it. Or people like going like, Black Hebrew roots are really into it too. And white people that like to say Yahweh and only, do things on Saturday because they're identifying with the Jews, and now it's all coming so clear. It's not clear. It's not clear at all. So we're going to leave off our Bible study. Well, I guess since we had that 6-minute hiccup hangover, whatever you want to call it, we'll look at that. We'll look at the Bible verse in question, that we're going to get back to, Lord willing, if we can get through all of these 7 hidden chakra points or whatever is going on here. I got a whole bunch of other things we've got to get through, but if we can get back to Eli and his sons, we're going to be picking up. But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. And the tease on the Bible study before the internet dropped out, it wasn't really the internet. It was my, I had to restart my computer. I had to restart my computer and do some updates because I guess you can only put that off for so long. And I want to, thank you all for sticking around or coming back, because what else are we going to do? What else are we going to do? I know somebody had to go post a Rob Skiba video, and boy, if you want to talk about it, I put the link in there. Just pop on and we can talk about your videos. But so where were we? He wanted to put them to death. It was the will of the Father. And then we were closing out on it, that word, it was the will of the Father used down here, in the New American Standard, desired to put him to death. King James said, because the Lord would slay, but that word isn't actually anything less than it was pleased with. It was his heartfelt desire. We had looked at, because this is the full use of the word. When you break it down, there's one portion of it that's used 29 times, the hepes, because you see 2654 has all of these different versions, but the one with 29, he was delighted. It pleased him. It had desire, was pleased. But that's not how the King James, translated the very same word in 1 Samuel 2:25. Would slay. No, The Lord, we're pleased to kill. So we can get back to that. I'm sure we have all types of questions.
Words of wisdom, although written by my decaying hand, may be imbued with the medicine of immortality.
Well, as we're starting the 7 Hermetic principles, so this is where the people basically describe as your Oprah theology. It's the Kabbalah, and they'll claim that they're Christians, like famously Oprah and other people's did, because they've identified that they with the Christ in them, and they've got this Kabbalistic dealio going where, oh yeah, I know Christ. It's Christ in me. We can all be Christ because a lot of these things we're finding out what's hidden is maybe all the other Christians, pagans, Scythians, barbarians, or who knows what, already all knew, and just before it was hidden from us, is that this is how you stay healthy. You sweat, stretch, eat organic. You know your pressure points, how to do all of these things, and if you need it, you can, you just knew everything about your body. You were more in tune with it because you're not, we didn't have whatever they're putting in the air, the food, the water, the plastics. We're a diminished product right now. But anyway, this isn't what I believe in. If anybody comes in the chat room and goes like, why is this guy pushing, Kabbalah? I'm not. I'm going to be doing stop and drop commentary. But in the meantime, it's time for us all to refresh our memory on the Kabbalah and how they seem innocuous. Wow, where'd that word come from? They're not. They're nefarious. The bad two-timers. Let's check out this video. We'll let it buffer some. I guess it's already buffered some. So that was good. We don't know who Hermes Trismegistus is, but man, he knows something about medicine of immortality. But, it's not of him that willeth or him that runneth, but God who shows mercy. We have no reason to boast even of our own salvation because we were dead and made alive. We'll talk about that. Whatever you want to talk about later, but now it's time for that long promised and now arrived review on the 7 Hermetic principles.
A few miles west of the Nile and just below the tip of its delta lies Saqqara, the necropolis of ancient Memphis, center of Lower Egypt from the days of the pharaohs through to the time of Egypt's Roman conquerors. The ibis, the graceful black and white bird in which the god Thoth showed himself, no longer visits the Nile at Memphis, but when the Ptolemies and their Roman successors drank from the holy river, the god's bird still came to its banks in great plenty. Wisdom is eternal, even if people are not. The Kybalion, while only published in 1908, is a manuscript that claims to be the essence of the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who, as we've discussed before, is believed to be our old pal Thoth. We should be clear that there are several different texts here worth exploring. There's the older Corpus Hermeticum, which is a huge ancient body of work in itself, along with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean and the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. But these writings do not actually make any specific references to the laws and principles that we're exploring today. And so we have the Kybalion, which is supposedly based upon ancient Hermeticism and is argued to be an elaboration of an ancient, unpublished Hermetic text of the same name, one which humanity has not yet actually found. While it's healthy to approach it with some skepticism, the profound wisdom of this text needs to be taught and explained. The Hermetica speaks very highly of cosmic laws, critical to be understood in order for our own liberation and transcendence. And that's why we've created the 2021 Almanac of the New Age. If you're interested in connecting with the celestial and personal cycles in order to start the new year off with an exceptionally high vibration, check out this book. You'll find links in the description. And with that, let's now dive into the Hermetic principles. Kybalion was written by unknown authors, known simply as the Three Initiates. But the most common theory is that it was authored by a man named William Walker Atkinson and some others, who was a famous American occultist and pioneer of the New Thought movement. In the first couple of pages, it says that it will only appear to you when the time is appropriate and you're ready for its wisdom. So I guess that means we're ready for it in mass, huh? Because there's more than a few videos and articles talking about it now. For the most part, it discusses the structure of the spiritual world and outlines the three great planes of existence: the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane, all of which are broken down into several lesser planes, which are kind of like astral black keys like the ones on a piano, each having their own vibration and frequency and are inhabited by different kinds of spirits and entities. Another aspect of the wisdom is found in its teachings of alchemy. It discusses aspects of spiritual and mental transmutation and how you can alter your vibration or frequency to move into these higher realms, interact with spiritual entities, and attain the wisdom of Hermes himself. The subject that has made the Kybalion a legendary book is its discussion of the 7 Hermetic principles, which are like the laws that govern the universe according to the Western mystery tradition, the foundation of many schools of esoteric thought today. Much like how physicists observe the universe, to the Hermetic mystics, they believed that the universe runs on natural laws. Apples fall, birds fly, things live and die. But when we take time to understand these laws, we can use them, and in some cases even leverage them, to transform life as we know it. Perhaps one day we can push against gravity to fly, or simply use the knowledge that one day we might die to live better lives. As it's described, whenever this wisdom resurfaces in culture, it acts as a catalyst for a creative renaissance, revolutions, and cultural regeneration. These 7 laws were some of the most influential systems of thought to the Renaissance and medieval philosophers, which even today can expand horizons, broaden possibilities, and aid one in the pursuit of a fuller, happier, more meaningful, and longer life. And so,
Wow, it's actually it might be working. So just a reminder that, as a Christian, we don't agree with all of their outcomes, but especially that, but we do know that, Christ told us that we could expect great things when we do, come in tune with our spirit. And I do think that takes spiritual exercise, spiritual disciplines, different things like that, as our world right now might just be considered, it's like, don't do anything except go and take communion and sing the happy, clappy songs of the modern church. And that's good enough. But if we, maybe we need to look back at some of the lives of the Cathars and especially the Huguenots. They intrigue me so much. So, let's get back to that video with that in mind. But, nobody here thinks that, you can push against gravity and fly because, we don't even believe in gravity. So that would, right from Jump Street, you just can't push against something that you don't believe in.
through these principles, remember that they were potentially first thought of thousands of years ago, despite only being codified recently in history before any modern science verified their unusually accurate and esoteric claims. The Kybalion even devotes a chapter to each principle and goes into what it's really all about, and we especially recommend going deeper by reading this book if you haven't already. It's a favorite of ours.
I've never read it, and I don't recommend it. I recommend
1. Mentalism.
Much like in the Corpus Hermeticum, this axiom embodies the idea that all is mind, something today we know as idealism. Basically, everything that happens is a result of a mental state which precedes it. For anything to exist, thoughts had to form first, which then formed physical reality or manifestation. But it goes even deeper than manifestation, though, for the principle of mind is rooted in the idea of the God mind, that the universe itself is the mind of God, or, going even bigger, that the universe is a thought in the mind of God, that all phenomena of life, matter, and energy of the material universe are
Isn't that funny how they think that's a deep thought? I mean, that's straight out of Animal House humor of like, so we could be a bubble in the toe of a giant, and Donald Sutherland smiles and shakes his head, and Gopher says, "Can I buy some pot from you? Come on, man."
thoughts of an infinite effect, the form of a field, as is thought of consciousness. In other words, when you view everything you think, and therefore do, as an interaction of a thought with another thought, you develop an understanding of the first principle of mentalism, which allows you to grasp the laws of the mental universe. This law ultimately says that it is our consciousness that allows us to interact with reality.
Principle 2, correspondence.
This truth
Now, is it picking on them too much to think that the distorted, when they go, the principle 2, is just a little too much? I mean, it's dramatic enough just what they're presenting. They're off, but they don't need to over.
correspond. This law is where we explore the legendary phrase, as above, so below, to much greater depths. In a nutshell, if something is happening on a physical level, chances are there is a relationship to a like energy on a higher frequency too. And if something occurs solely in the physical, if that's even possible, it will have an effect on the other planes of existence. By observing the principle of correspondence, we can come to know the whole of the universe by exploring the relationship between the higher and lower nature of
Principle 3, vibration.
In short, vibration, even things that appear motionless and still, like a rock on the ground, is still moving at a molecular and atomic level and beyond. To quote Walter Russell, in the wave lies the secrets of creation. It explains that the distinction between manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and spirit are all just the result of different vibrational frequencies. The higher a person or thing is on the scale, the higher the rate of vibration. In fact, spiritual alchemy in the Kabbalion is described simply as the practical application of this principle. To change one's mental state is to change vibration. You can sometimes do this by an effort of will, by deliberately fixing the attention upon a more desirable state. Ultimately, even thoughts have their own rate of vibration and can be controlled like tuning an instrument to produce various results of self and environmental mastery. As your understanding of vibration, frequency, harmony, and resonance gets better, so too shall your power over yourself grow.
Principle 4, polarity.
Following in our last principle, this one says that everything has an opposite. While this might seem out of the ordinary for a spiritual text that talks about unity and one mind, this one refers to how the unity manifests through creation. The whole thing is like Newton's first law of motion, that everything has an equal and opposite action and reaction. All manifested things have two sides, two aspects, or two poles. Opposites are identical in nature, yet different in degree. Extremes meet, and all paradoxes can be reconciled. An obvious example is a hot and cold tap, both waters being aspects of temperature, varying only in degree. There is no clear crossover moment when hot stops being hot and starts being cold, and vice versa, with no absolutes on either end too, especially since the quality of hot and cold are relative to your own perception. If it's cold outside, jump in a freezing lake for a few minutes and get colder than the average temperature outside. Suddenly that cold air is actually kind of feeling pretty warm to you. This one is quite important since it suggests that we can change the polarity of a degree of emotion by recognizing it as a spectrum and choosing the degree which best suits our needs.
Principle 5, rhythm.
This one builds upon both the principles of vibration and polarity, as it states that everything is manifested as a measured motion, to and from, outflow and inflow, a swing backwards and a swing forwards, just like a pendulum. This law also reminds us that there is a rhythm between every pair of opposites or poles. Learning from this principle allows us to transition from one pole to the other, and not necessarily need to go to poles of extreme opposites. It also arguably controls the cycle of life and death, creation and destruction, rise and fall, and of course, manifests in our mental states. Know that things you lose will come back, and that things you own now will also one day disappear.
Causation.
Again, we find ourselves overlapping with previous laws, and it makes sense that they'd fit together. This principle states that there is a cause for every effect, and an effect for every cause. It also argues that there's no such thing as chance or coincidence, that it's merely a term indicating already existing causes that we can't recognize or perceive. The empowering use of this principle is to make the conscious choice to rise above the plane of thought you're currently on and become your own cause, and not just an effect of others and the situations you find yourself in. In other words, strive to act rather than react, or be mindfully responsive at best. If you want to be good at something, you need to practice it every day, as opposed to resigning yourself to merely reacting to the consequences of not having done any self-work and then experiencing the problems that inevitably arise when you're not pursuing your highest calling.
Principle 7. Gender.
This principle explains how gender is manifested in everything, but this doesn't necessarily relate to sexual gender or how you identify yourself. It's more about the masculine and feminine energies that lead to creation and procreation in the universe. And if you haven't seen our episode on masculine and feminine energies in general, you can always check that video out right after this one. It doesn't refer to someone's physical sex, nor does it suggest that someone of a certain sex necessarily has a matching mental gender. In actuality, ideally, you would want to have a balanced mental gender, embodying both this and these two polarities of energy exist on all planes of existence and represents different aspects on different planes. Everything and everyone contains these two elements or principles. The Kabbalion explains that the divine feminine is more receptive, facilitating new thoughts, concepts, and ideas, including the work of the imagination. The sacred masculine, on the other hand, works more by giving out or expressing, and rules over the will of an individual and helps put things into action. It is said that there must be a balance in these two forces. Without the feminine, the masculine will act without restraint, order, or reason, resulting in chaos. The feminine alone, on the other hand, will constantly reflect and fail to actually do anything, resulting in stagnation. With both the masculine and feminine working in conjunction, there is thoughtful action that breeds success, which tells us that both the feminine and the masculine fulfill each other. Ultimately, choosing the middle path between these extremes is the key to using all 7 Hermetic principles to full effect and achieving lasting self-mastery without straying too far from the path. At the same time, though, we must remember that these are only principles. By themselves, they're kind of useless, but when you creatively apply them in your life, you can achieve any endeavor you dedicate yourself to and have your own personal renaissance. The best way to understand them is by experiencing them for yourself. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Remember to try and apply the wisdom of these teachings in your life, mostly by asking questions like, have I ever experienced mind over matter? Have I ever attracted something into my life repeatedly by...
Oh boy, oh boy. You know, the thing is, they're so into it. They're so into it. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Edna. Gaining wisdom is here. Hot and cold, not double-mindedness. You know what? That's a good analogy, because it says about the despised church of Laodicea. Well, they were neither hot nor cold. And then, I think he's tying that into James, where it says, don't be double-minded. There's Victoria and Bob Marley. Hopefully you got to see some of that video. What what's stuck in your mind, about it? The 1908 Kabbalah. That's when that Kabbalah was really quantified, codified, bound up, printed, and put out by the rabbis to the world. And what was their big realization? as above, so below. Geez, can we, is that, are we ever going to, we're never going to get away from that. I guess that's going to always come back, around. And when you think about that, that was the time where Aleister Crowley, you know, and what I believe, of course, is that, the beast of Armageddon had to happen during the time of Armageddon, which was, like 300, 1,315 years ago. And we're living in that last time before Gog and Magog. But in that loosing of Satan for that last 335 years, as my interpretation of Daniel chapter 12, blessed are those who make the last 45. I think we have 25 years left of that, but they are mimicking the whole, loosing of Satan after the reaping of the wheats and the tares. There was some sort of orphan genetic based racial thing going on, that Satan was imprisoned for 1,000 years where he couldn't deceive the nations. And now after his release, he's developing these nations again from city states, mocking everything along the way. And during that, going right up to World War I was, I think, their interpretation of Armageddon, and that they're just, it was who is going to appeal to the false god, like the Kabbalah, of, we're doing this for people of our kind. And it almost is, when you let it all wash over you, remember they were living in a era to where each country thought they had their own god. And God wrote this book. He planned that Israel would be, well, that's my team, even though to everybody else, they were the most stuck up, stiff-necked, well, and God said, well, to prove it, he, the worst, and said, if they obey me, this will happen. And, here we are today. So, from that, we can either watch another one of those videos. That's in the cards. We can, check out another one of that videos from the esoteric point of view. We can also study the just war theory. That's a doctrine, also referred to as a tradition of military ethics. And it's studied by military leaders, theologians, ethicists, and policymakers. I remember being assigned my first paper in an ethics class about just war theory. And, once again, Augustine was right in the middle of it. Opponents of the just war theory may either be inclined to be a stricter pacifistic standard, or they may be inclined toward a more permissive nationalist standard. So we can look at that. I have, a short review of what some people are calling, the good war myth, which is the myth of World War II. We might come right back to that. What else? So here's that Spirit Sciences website. If you, see anything that interests you, videos. Well, it looks like they're from 1,600,000 views. The Secret Language of Thoughts, another one over 1 million. Sacred Geometry, the movie. Oh, I know you guys. You're all like, you're always like, Alan, quit going into math, quit going into math. But whenever I show that sacred geometry math, you're all, and they get all those numbers from our body. I think that, it's only hidden and the veil has to be lifted because God allowed it to be sealed up, just like he told Daniel. He goes, seal it up until the end. Seal it up, Daniel. What do you think Daniel was going to do? Like, no, I'm not going to seal it up. He was already asking. He goes like to that angel twice. He goes like, what was I just talking about? What was happening there? Let's look that up. That's some good stuff, man. Oh, shoot. Oh, yeah, it's in the Old Testament again. It's still there. There's got to be somewhere in here where he goes like, Daniel acts confused or something like that. Oh, here it is, verse 8. He just got done telling him it. He goes, I heard. I'm looking at verse 8. Maybe I'll just do it like this. Verse 8 says, I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, oh, Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He couldn't even remember because in verse 9, he goes, hey, go on your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the end of time, where many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand, because you know why? We've been made wise. We've been made wise, and then once we've been made wise, we find out, wow, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, which probably, was just what, that's what brought me here. It's probably what brought you here. And, the thankfulness for our sins being washed away, because we're worms and we're not really men. Let's see. So that seems like fun. Nothing but fun coming. What's this one?
Did you feel that? It's here. The moment we talked about nearly 10 years ago. The shift of ages prophesied for millennia. The winds of real change are upon us. People are waking up. Incontestable institutions are being questioned, analyzed, and dismantled brick by brick. The time has come. Are you ready? Because the world needs you to be who you really are. We need you to be the change, and we need it now. You might be thinking, easier said than done, Patchman. I get it. I really do. It's been hard for me too. After all, our modern world is so distracting. The technology, the work, the events that your friends invite you to that you don't really want to go to, but then you say yes anyways because you don't want to make them feel bad. It's all so much, and it never stops. And it's especially hard for spiritual people like you, because sometimes it doesn't matter how much willpower or self discipline you have. The world will happily pull you off your path for a whole day or a whole year if you let it. It's like a nonstop fight for your focus. And it can be draining and frustrating. But thankfully, after that dark winter of separation and suffering in the collective, we're getting a boost of much needed energy from nature.
Not spring. It's wow. Well, those were the good old days.
Are stretching and yawning after their long winter sleep. And excited for a new day? Are you feeling like the powerful Super magical sparkle pony I know you are. No? Not to worry. I have just the thing. After the year we've had, I think it's high time for a little spiritual spring cleaning. In this video, I'll show you my top 4 magical techniques to completely refresh your mind, body, and spirit. This can help you shift your reality fast, even in our distracting modern.
Dang. Nothing probably is made. Okay, these guys don't let you show stuff without copyright strikes. See this container barge here? It's going to crash, man. Right here. And it lets out all of these little rubber ducks. It was a container ship. This is how I got to that. You know, this is really when they figured out the currents of the earth. It wasn't until 1991. The rubber ducks at the game, you know, so they followed their paths, you know, trying to base it on the rotation of the earth. Of course, you know, that's crazy. And so, you know, basically the ducks went everywhere, and, you know, they can make the math work. You know, they'll just say this and that. This was your path. The global conveyor belt. It's the world's largest serpentine belt. It's a current. And I'd love to see it on a flat earth. You're talking about that earlier, right? It's still on the table, that thermohalocline. But in reality, right now, I'm kind of leaning toward, you know, looking at a little bit of that sacred geometry video, and, you know, just giving you the, you know, the fair, you know, warning. Maybe it'd be like when you were children and they say, warning, this TV show is for mature audiences only. Now, what 12-year-old isn't going to go like, I'm mature enough. I'm mature enough. Let's see. Let's just pick out and see what Victoria's saying. A good name is better than fine perfume. One's day of death is better than his day of birth. Now, is that from Job or Proverbs? Come on, Victoria, don't tease us. Let's see what Sean said. I wonder why the world wonder is such a trigger. I like nevertheless. I wonder. Heard now, I think it is backwards. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 11. And I know that a lot of you guys out there right now from the casino days are going like, yeah, 7 and 11. That's nice. Or 7-1. 7 and 11 sounds good too. Let's look up what Ecclesiastes, I'll read it to you. Ecclesiastes 7:11. You know, and I know you guys, you can't help it. You're going to say, come on, 7-11. We're going to win the double pot. Wisdom is even better when you have money. No, the English Standard Version starts it off like this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and advantage to those who see the sun. In the King James, that's pretty much what it says too. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. Some of its crafts receive my instruction instead of silver and knowledge rather than pure gold. My instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than pure gold. The verse right after that, Proverbs 8:11, for wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire compares with her. That's wisdom that it's referring to. And there it is. There's another proof text in Ecclesiastes 7:10. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is unwise of you to ask about this. Whoa. Well, because you should just know why. We know why. We don't have to ask why. They're replaying the Bible. They're plotting our end, their ultimate demise. They're the bad guys. Hey, you bad guys. Oh, I forgot I'm not sharing the screen. Hey, let's see. Oh, yeah, that Luke 14:26. We'll look that up. Consistently in the New Testament. Okay. Oh, yeah, Luther the Truther had been dealing with some people asking him about this too. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciples. Right, what's the hard part? What's the hard part on that one? I mean, we've all hated ourselves, right? And we know what we hated about ourselves. It was that there were certain times that we acted outside ourselves in ways that we didn't understand. And at that point in life, we knew more than ever bad. We understood because of the Spirit, we realize in hindsight, but finally we understood we were actually evil and guilty before God, deserving a righteous punishment. Now that is a gift from God, just that knowledge that can, make you, so we all share that in common in that we hated ourselves and realizing we would, because you had a Bible or somebody was telling you, and you realized you would have been one of those people going, crucify him, crucify him. And so you hated yourself, and you know what your parents need. You know what your children need. You know what you need to be praying for. It's not in so much as that you actually hate your parents, but you have to understand that the reason you hated yourself. Well, let's go back and we'll look at that verse again one more time, and with maybe just a different skew on it. Read the verse in that context, and remember, always let it wash over you that this is the God of love. This is his Bible. We are going to be without excuse because he is perfect in his holiness. It's on us to a little bit here, line upon line, precept upon precept, to be addicted to scripture to say, I got time, I'll figure it out. Knowing God's the good guy. Abba, Father, thank you for taking me out of that orphanage of sin and, making me a co-heir with the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. May his name forever be praised. Now, we're going to look at that verse one more time. Here it is. This is another one of the top 3 Bibles, the Berean Study Bible. If anyone comes to me and he cannot be my disciple, okay, well, how can you really? But they don't need to go through that same thought process of like, oh my, I so much deserve hell, but now I don't have to go there. To understand that they need that experience in their life isn't that hard. So you're not actively hating them in any way that's going to be like overtly like, hey, here's your dog food, your Alpo, and we're going to be having those special cheeses the women can dig up sometimes that make everything particularly yummy, but you only get dog food, because we hate you, man, just as much as those Packers fans hate the Vikings and the Bears and the Lions and everybody else, It's like if you're a football team, right? If you're not on the cheering for the right team, watch out. They might actually throw you off the balcony of a stadium. I've heard about that like 6 or 7 times in my life. They just right off the balcony because of a football team. I'm kind of leaning towards, I didn't see a lot of suggestions. So, and I'm feeling it, man, that you want to brush up on your sacred geometry, right? And you're strong enough to not worry about, and I have faith in you, and I know you're not going to go into the dark side because these Kabbalist, talking sock puppets, they got no power over you. So let's do that. Let's check that out. That's not it. Where's that one about the geometry?
Believe anything we discuss in spirit science. Simply have your own experience. Better get some popcorn ready. This one's going to be pretty long. Back in the late 1700s, early 1800s time period, there was a social movement liberating the modern world from the reign of control that religion and superstition had on the people. Essentially, after our darkest part on the precession of the equinox, we were really beginning to wake up. Started making new inventions that were rapidly changing the world. The industrial era was beginning. Because of this, we began to see that maybe religion as an answer was not in our best interest, and so the movement happened. We turned to science instead to answer our questions about the universe. The only problem with this was that we grouped in many things with superstition that we probably shouldn't have. Things like consciousness, intuition, human connection, paranormal phenomenon. All of it went right out of the door with superstition, when in fact we've proven these things today to be real. So after 200 years of just going with the same idea about what's classified as superstition and what's okay to talk about, mainstream science is still going with the assumptional explanation for it, but they keep on believing it. Why? Well, when we toss literally, the reason that it's tough talking about this stuff in the mainstream scientific community is because it's just the way science is being for to prove that theory wrong. The field of noetics and the works of biologist Rupert Sheldrake and his colleagues have more than proven that consciousness exists and is definitely not a part of the brain. Now, no disrespect to things that we've been led to believe to be true, simply is not. I'm not saying blindly accept all of the new stuff that's coming out nowadays, but we should at least put it on the table and be able to discuss it as a global community. One other thing before we get this rolling, I want to give an overview about what sacred geometry really is. Sacred geometry is the human is solely based on sacred geometry. Because it is, we can begin to see and understand where we have come from, where we are now, and where we're going. The universe is infinite. It has no beginning and no end. In both science and religion, creation is often discussed from a perspective of having a set or a specific beginning. In science, we call it the Big Bang. This is the theory that says everything in the universe was compressed to the point of a single, infinitesimally small particle, something we would perceive as unity, and then rapidly exploded and expanded outwards and created everything in the universe. In religion, it is generally called creation, when God, or some all-knowing and all-seeing entity, being the only one imbued with such power, created everything, presumably in 6 days, before taking a well-deserved day off. Let's take a step outside the box for a second and put these two sides of this cosmic coin into a Vesca Pisces. As usual, the two enemies that never got along actually have quite a lot in common. Both say that the universe started with unity and expanded outwards. Both say that light was an important factor in creation as well. If at the beginning of the universe we were one, that we came from the same source. But wait a second, how can we make sense out of that statement, the universe is infinite, if we are measuring it from a sense of having a beginning? And this is what we're going to talk about now. If we value the pursuit of knowledge, we must be free to follow wherever that search may lead us. The free mind is not a barking dog to be tethered on a 10-foot chain. Today, I want to talk about two specific energies that can be expressed through this image. The energy that flows here is male and female energy. Male energy is focused, and female energy is creative and random. Neither of them is greater nor weaker than the other, and both can be extremely powerful when manifested. Female energy is the land of unbridled possibilities, creative potential, and affecting the universe from within. Focused male energy takes direct road to point A to point B. This energy can be as strong as a tank, accomplishing tasks and going where it needs to go with precision and without distraction. The important thing to know about this energy isn't how they move. I'm going to use some super basic sacred geometry to demonstrate this. This is the Fibonacci spiral. We're going to be talking a lot more about it when we dive into the topic. For now, all you have to know is that it starts at 1 and flows outward forever in a very specific way, and is present in all life everywhere. As male energy flows through the spiral, it goes from base point to point straight where it needs to be. Female energy, however, would flow in the actual spiral. It would go around, going in and around outside all of the lines, but still getting to the same or similar results. This is the graphic representation of how it flows, but it also acts in the same way. From this understanding, you can see how we use these energies in our lives. It's the difference between driving straight to work and being on schedule all the time, and taking the scenic route because it's a more pleasant ride, even if it means being late. It's baking a cake strictly by what it says in the cookbook, and putting it together with what just feels right. It's getting that promotion.
I would like to add that there were many times where, I worked hard before I could retire at 54. And I would just leave early if I wanted to take the scenic route, and I would
For working the hardest and coming up with the best ideas. Here's a relatable example. It's the difference between and so dream, according to many, didn't make much sense. Both male and female energy, like the chakras, have their own traits. Male energy is linear, analytical, strategic, and practical. However, when male energy is constructed, it is very blundering and confrontational. And what tends to occur is not seeing all sides of a situation, or not being open to any other possibility other than the one being pursued. You can see, on the other hand, moves and curves, expression to schedule. It can get out of its flow, running rampant between emotions and mood swings and ideas. The creativity could get jumbled and come out as an out-of-control mess. We don't have this widespread issue in today's society, and it has a lot to do with our brain hemispheres. We're going to look at that in a moment. One big difference between the two is that male energy looks at parts, and female energy has very little energy itself. For example, if you look at the shape of male and female bodies, men have straighter bodies, women have curvy bodies. We have two of them. And if you remember what you learned in grade 10 biology, this will be familiar. The left brain is the male energy side of the brain. It is orderly, statistical, logical, and mathematical, and extremely experienced. The right brain cannot make sense about how the left brain understands things. Okay, so as a species, we are primarily left brain. We essentially have a male energy imbalance. There is way too much of it. It is dominant thing. In fact, it's kind of a blessing in disguise. But we have to talk about some other things first. Everything in the universe is geometric. Whether it's people, trees, cats, plants, can be measured on a trick. What we're going to be looking at today is the pattern. Essentially, what this means is that everything in the universe comes out of this single pattern. I'm not making this up. This single image will change everything. Go to deep to the creation pattern of everything in existence, even non-tangible things, emotions, thoughts, music in its entire spectrum. Everything comes from this image. Okay, so there are 13 information systems that comes out of the flower of life. Today, I'm going to show you how physical reality can manifest itself, which is just one that at first it may not make sense. I ask that you do not choose immediately to shut this out, and just watch with an open mind, and try and see this in a way. Also, I want to tell you that by learning about sacred geometry simply by observing, you are absorbing only a very minuscule amount of information. If you really want to learn more, you must begin to draw yourself. I kid you not. When you do this, you begin.
All right, just to check in to make sure we're still streaming, and we are. Oh, I was afraid of that. But like you said, lagging the last 5 minutes or so. Thank you for that. Maybe that can be buffering right now, but you know what we can do? We can ask the Lord in prayer to get this video buffer and let you guys go on a Saturday night. You've just gotten through the introduction, maybe missing those 5 minutes of the introduction and their whininess of like, oh, nobody understands us Gnostics, and we're so much smarter. But we'll be able to get up on some of it. So I'll check in about every 10 or 15 minutes. But they're just getting to the exciting part now. And I think that, with a prayer, well, let's just do it. So men, women, you know how God wants you to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, show us your glory. Show us, what we can intuitively know about math. And as we realize that you have brought us here for this, our synapses are firing. We long, Heavenly Father, to see the difference in the way we understand these things they do. We heirs with Jesus Christ, that same Jesus Christ, the anointed one, holiness, purity, death. He's proved and provided the way for have our sins washed away. So, Father, let's pray that you will superintend and even though it's good, check that out right now. Before last words of wisdom, go to Scotty. The sky is a crazy place. Truer words have never been spoken. Thank you, Lawrence.
begin to see things in a new way. You begin to understand why things are done in the way that they are done. Promise. The flower of life was known around the world in ancient times. It was found in Ireland, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, China, Greece, Germany, India, and Iceland. It's also been recorded to have been found in England, Tibet, Japan, Sweden, Lapland, the Yucatan, and I think 14 other places. This thing is everywhere. Not only that, but everywhere around the world it has the same name, the flower of life. Now, to understand the flower of life, first we have to talk about how it's formed. This could get incredibly complex, so I'll try and keep it simple. Imagine consciousness, or spirit, floating in a void, which means it's nothingness, and then spirit. No physical body or mind, just spirit, and that's it. Then blackness, essentially nothing, all around the spirit, for infinite. Spirit decides to do something, so it expands its consciousness all around itself as far as it can go without moving. It creates a sphere around itself. This is the first circle in the flower of life. Then, spirit has an awareness of what's around itself in 360 degrees. It moves to the very edge of the sphere anywhere and repeats what it did the first time. It creates this image, which also creates the Vesica Pisces. Within the Vesica Pisces is a vast and incredible amount of knowledge about width, proportion, depth. Also comes the square roots of 2, 3, and 5, which are all numbers that go on forever. But even more interestingly comes geometric information about light. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, spirit has no choice but to do it again. Spirit is flawless, and therefore it will move flawlessly, creating the next circle either here or here, exactly one radius away from the other circle next to it. Every time spirit moves another sphere, more and more knowledge comes out of the image that is created. The first complete image to be formed is this. It has two names, the seed of life, or the Genesis pattern, and for good reason. Now, let's look at the book of Genesis for a second. Each of these movements, or creations of circles, can be seen as another day. On the first movement, the second sphere, it created knowledge about not only mathematical proportions, but light. The first sentence of Genesis says, the earth was without form and void, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. In the very next sentence, God says, let there be light. The key here is in the order. The movement happened first, then light happened immediately after. Well, but what about the waters? Well, you have to remember, the Bible has been changed over time a lot. The ancient Egyptians would say that the way our modern Bibles begin creation is impossible, especially if you think about it from a physics point of view. Imagine a dark, infinite space that goes on forever and ever in all directions. You're just floating there with nothing. You can't really fall, but where would you fall to? From a purely physics or mathematical point of view, motion itself, or kinetic energy, is absolutely impossible in a void. You can't even rotate, because motion cannot become real unless there's one other object in the space around you. So the ancient Egyptians would say that before God moved upon the face of the waters, it would first have to create something to move relative to. So, Genesis pattern, after 3 spheres, you get the Holy Trinity. Another interesting one, it says in many Bibles of the world, not just the Christian Bible, that on the 4th day of Genesis, exactly 1/2 of creation was completed. Starting from the first motion, exactly 1/2 of the circles were formed on the 4th day. 5th day of Genesis, 6th circle, more information, and then on the 6th day, a geometric circle takes place. The last circle, beginning, there were 6. Our Bible even said creation was formed in 6 days, and this fits exactly. This is the pattern of Genesis we live in. These original movements of spirit are really important, but now let's look at something even cooler. Another image that comes out of this pattern is this. It's called the Tree of Life. Many may recognize this as the Jewish or Hebrew Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah did not originate this image, and there's proof. The Tree of Life does not belong to any culture, not even the Egyptians, who carved the Tree of Life on 2 sets of 3 pillars at Karnak Temple, Luxor, over 5,000 years ago. It's outside any race or religion. You'll also notice that every circle on the Tree of Life is either the length or width of the Vesica Pisces. The second image beyond Genesis in the flower of life is the egg of life. This is formed during the second vortex motion. Upon its completion, it creates an image like this, a 3-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand. If you were to connect their centers, you would see a cube. So what? Who cares? Well, the ancient Egyptians did, because they were concerned with creation, life, and death. They called this cluster of spheres structure that created your body. Your entire physical existence is dependent on the egg of life structure, and everything about you was created from that form. Everything from your eye color to how long your fingers are. This is a whole lesson on its own, so let's move on for now. All around the world, the flower of life was always made the exact same way. See, this pattern can clearly go on forever. However, they always stopped after 19 circles. Why? Well, because they didn't want you to see what I'm about to show you. Back then, this image and knowledge was sacred, that they couldn't allow it to become common knowledge. It was appropriate at that time. However, you use the information or fall further into darkness. In biology, all of life are the zona pellucida of the flower of life. You must remove these, then complete the spheres that were cut off by the zona pellucida. With one more step, you will have the secret. Finish the drawing, add the final missing circles, giving you this. This image is the fruit of life. This pattern of 13 circles is one of the holiest, most sacred existence. It's called the fruit because it is the result, the fruit, from which the fabric of the details of the reality were created. Remember when we talked about male and female energy, lesson 4? As you can see, this image is female. It has no straight lines. However, when you combine male lines with these female circles, something amazing happens. What you do is draw a straight line from the very center of every single circle to every other circle in this image. When you do this, you get an image which is known throughout the universe, everywhere, as Metatron's cube. It is one of the most important informational systems in the universe, one of the basic creation patterns in existence, or geometry for that matter, knows that there are 5 unique shapes in the universe, and that they are crucial to understanding both regular and sacred geometry. They are called...
All right, the poor. So let me see. Yeah, we're still streaming. Right back at it then.
platonic solids. A platonic solid has certain characteristics by definition. First of all of its faces are the same size. For example, a cube, the most well-known platonic solid, has a square on every face, so all of its faces are the same size. Secondly, the edges of the platonic solids are all the same length. All edges of the cube are the same length. Third, it only has one size of interior angles between the faces. In the case of the cube, this angle is 90 degrees. And fourth, when put inside of a sphere, all of the points will touch the edge of the sphere perfectly. With that definition, there are only 4 shapes besides the cube that fit that description. So what are they? Well, we have the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the hexahedron. All of these shapes are found within Metatron's cube. This knowledge is also where original alchemy came from. The ancient alchemists and great souls like Pythagoras, father of Greece, considered each shape to have an elemental aspect to them. The tetrahedron considered fire. The cube was earth. The octahedron was air. The isosahedron and tachyon energy are all. This is the grid of zero-point technology. The sphere is voidness. These 6 elements are the building blocks of the universe, and they create the qualities of the universe. To summarize, this is the first informational system that comes out of life through Metatron's cube. In alchemy, they rarely discussed ether. I've read that in the Pythagorean school, if you even uttered the word dodecahedron outside of the school, they would kill you on the spot. That's how sacred this shape was. 200 years later, when Plato was alive, he would discuss it, but only very carefully. This is because the dodecahedron is near the outer edge in your energy field, and is the highest form of consciousness. There's quite a bit more here, but I don't think I can go much further on it right now. Anyways, recognize this? The periodic table of elements? Every single element on this table has a geometric relation to one of these 5 shapes. Modern scholars ridiculed this idea until the 1980s, when Professor Robert Moon at the University of Chicago demonstrated that the entire periodic table of elements, literally everything in the physical world, is based on these same 5 forms. In fact, throughout modern physics, chemistry, and biology, the sacred geometric patterns of creation are being rediscovered. Another example is the egg of life that I showed you earlier. Hopefully that will help you to understand just how incredible and important of a discovery this truly is. We have 5 platonic geometries that form everything in creation, but we don't have a hexagonal shape. If we look at the flower of life, we see that its ultimate basic form is in a 6-pointed shape, called a hexagon. Want to see where else hexagons form in life? We have all of these hexagons, and yet there is no platonic solid that is formed with a hexagon. So what gives? Well, I want to introduce the vector equilibrium, which was coined by Buckminster Fuller. It is actually formed from 3 two-dimensional hexagons that swivel around each other, and its basic shape is that.
I want to help you remember that name.
square. These are the two smallest shapes that you can make with straight lines, and together they balance at each other's corners to create the perfect shape. Why is it the perfect shape? The reason is that every single line which is connected in this shape is the same distance away from every other point, including the very center of the shape itself. Not even the Platonic solids have that definition, which also makes this the most stable shape and polyhedron, and the basis of the three-dimensional flower of life. Finally, the only reason it's not a Platonic solid is because it has both squares and triangles within it. Platonic solids are Platonic because each face is the same, which makes me think that other shapes must exist that are balanced between two different shapes as well, and construct everything in the universe. Now, in the comments or in credits, depending on where you're watching this, I posted links to a TED Talks video by Garrett Lacey, a particle physicist who tells us of an amazing discovery in the scientific field. I want to show you and talk about his findings, and then we'll look at dimensions after that. Okay, so Garrett has discovered that by examining coral, they found that each coral head has thousands of different polyps. These polyps are constantly budding and branching into genetically identical neighbors. Through performing heat experiments on these polyps, they were able to find that every single polyp is part of a whole, a single unit of being, but each one is experiencing its own reality individually. From their findings with the coral, they're able to look at quantum mechanics. See, the mathematics of quantum mechanics shows us exactly how our universe works, and we see that everything in the reality.
Let me let this buffer. So I'm going to let him tell it needs a little bit of bufferage. Oh, look at that. Man. There you go. Here we go. Some deep thoughts hanging out here tonight. Hey, man, that's awesome. Yeah, there are the flower of life. It really is amazing how it's just out there everywhere. Everybody knew about it. This isn't, the narrow road has always been narrow. The Lord has kept it that way. Because even when King David was at the height of what you would call the Hebraic military might, where countries from all over were paying them tribute, they were paying tribute because they were afraid, not because they all feared Jehovah. It wouldn't have done them any good. Remember? Jehovah wasn't having anything to do with anybody else except the Hebrews. He let them be ruled by, of course, they would have to be lesser gods created, spiritual entities they had going. But is that now Jesus tore down that wall of separation and joy to the world. He fulfilled, and we understand now that the gospel was preached to Abraham when Elion told him that in your seed all nations will be blessed. All nations. And that's where we live now. So hopefully that's what we like to call bufferage. And so it's time to go back to the math. It's quantum physics that is and equals the land of imagination. Now, why do I prefer geometry over calculus? I don't know. because it makes more sense. I want one answer, not four. Maybe that's it. That's probably it. But quantum physics, they don't give you anything because they want you to start off with 97% of the earth is dark matter. You can't see it. Use this math now, it works. What? Nuclear weapons? Geometry boy.
We are individually experiencing only one of these possibilities, much like the individual polyps. What physics is telling us is that everything comes down to geometry and the interactions between elementary particles. Things can happen only when things are perfectly balanced. So Garrett starts showing us some subatomic particles and the things that make up electrons and protons and neutrons. We always consider these to be the smallest particle, but we never think about what's creating them. Garrett demonstrates to us how the particles that create point particles really work. He shows that when you plot them out in how they move, this is what they look like. At the tiniest scales of the universe in how it works is very beautiful. Now, look at this. This is one of the ways that these charges branch off from each other. As you can see, it flows in a hexagonal pattern, the same pattern that we found in the expanded flower of life. Then, if you rotate this pattern in six-dimensional charge space, you see it forms yet another pattern. Many of you will recognize this as the shape of the Star of David, but its true name is the star tetrahedron, which maps perfectly over the fruit of life. This entire pattern created by the particles is mapped across over precise places on a 200-dimensional spherical shape scientists have called E8, of which also has a geometric shape. By rotating that shape as well, you can see how there are nearly infinite possibilities as to how these elementary particles interact with each other. The details are into form. Now, as the shape is rotating in 8 dimensions, you can see a myriad of different patterns here. Look at this one in particular. This is a lot like Metatron's cube, doesn't it? At the heart of particle physics is pure, beautiful geometry. By now, you probably can begin to see where sacred geometry falls into this, come from somewhere else. Light, the platonic, used and unknown to modern man. It is also the source of energy patterns and, well, everything. It all comes from the flower of life. I believe this is what is at the heart of what's forming every subatomic particle formation. And it probably goes at least a few levels deeper than what Garrett is showing us. Phi, also known as the golden ratio.
You know, because we're still streaming a little bit. Yeah, this buffering is brutal. It is. Is the video playing better or worse? Because, or is it just when I try to talk, guys? Because this is the Creative Commons video that I'm showing. And I really want you to more important than the Fibonacci sequence. And Luther, you couldn't be right. It just struck me the same thing. It's the star of Rimfram. And I almost interrupted before it started having buffering issues to say that you know that in the book of Joshua, the Levites carried with them the idols of the gods of Rimfam and doubled down on their already broken covenant. And I think that that's what Kabbalah is trying to do now, because I don't know, you know, everybody knows that historically the iconography or your emojicon is a menorah. You know, that's the Hebrews. Now, the God of Rimfram is that Star of David. You know, named that to intention the apple of God's eye. I'm turning I let my phone run down so it's charging up slowly, and then I'll be able to turn it back and monitor the show again. So hopefully that was some good bufferage, you know, spontaneous prayer. Just thank you, Heavenly Father, for everyone that who has been staying this far. I've already been praying to myself, and I want to pray for them now, and let us agree that part was for you. 5 was for you. Heavenly Father, bless this part and show them about this unknown number, that and how you are knowledge that we needed. You are unsealing right the one. Oh, it's acting better during the talking. Well, hopefully it's because, and this will have to be a part of a controlled experiment too, because I know that the internet is weak, but tell me if I could only do, show the video tonight, because normally, I can play videos all night long, but something's going on. Oh, you know what? And plus all of that, while I was doing a monologue, I was supposed to be holding the microphone like this. So that's the problem, because I saw time where it actually, the screen went black for a couple of seconds. That has to be, as we say, charged up enough. We're going to see something. I think that the Wi-Fi, so at least it is, handling the voice and everything, but for everything else, we just prayed. So now, take breath, and Lord, we'll just go forward in faith that that prayer is going to be answered. And here's what you needed to know about something that we don't study enough.
If you had a rod and we're going to put a mark on, you place mark the fire ratio, which is here or here. The length of C with phi, it will create the exact same image, only bigger. Phi is the mathematical root of all other sequences. See, every mathematical sequence in existence needs a minimum of 3 numbers, similar to how. The next thing that you need to know is that this ratio is found in all life everywhere. By sort of, I mean it's really Fibonacci, but we'll look at that in a moment. Look at your hand. Not only does each finger have its own ratio move each finger, which is phi to the next bone, but it oscillates back and forth from the tallest finger to the thumb. You wonder why the human hand is like that? It's based on phi. This relationship is found throughout the body in various ways, moving up the arms and legs, your face, throughout the entire body. This is a Greek statue that accurately represents this. The Greeks were very precise when they made their art because they understood phi, Fibonacci, and the importance of these sequences. When the Romans took over Greece, you could see the perfection in statues just completely disappear. I'm not saying the Romans were bad artists. They just didn't measure everything to the same caliber that the Greeks did. Here is the phi ratio in butterflies. You can see this ratio everywhere, from the wing size to the body to the antennas. They're all phi ratios. Here's dragonflies. It's the same story. Phi runs along the entire body and the relation to the body and the wings. Here it is in frogs. Phi is found throughout the body in relation to the head, to the arms, to the fingers, and so on. Well, what about fish? You'd think they wouldn't be found in fish. Well, here's 3 kinds of fish. Once again, the ratios are consistent. It doesn't just apply to these creatures, though. Regardless of what mammal, insect, avian, plant, or living creature of any kind, you will find this ratio one way or another. There's a reason for this, but we'll get to that in a moment. Let me show you the importance we used to place on this golden ratio. In ancient times, we built many structures based on phi because we understood divine proportion. This is the pagoda of Yakushiji Temple in Japan. It's built with these same mathematics, from the doorway to the ball on top of the temple. It is a structural embodiment of the proportions that all life holds. The Parthenon in Greece also has the exact same mathematical structure, but even more. I recommend watching Nova's Secrets of the Parthenon if you wish to learn more about this, because the stuff that they find is really cool. The Great Pyramid in Giza also has these proportions. They're incredibly precise, perfect in every way. You'd think that by building these structures using the logical and mathematical proportions so carefully, they would hinder the creativity behind these buildings, but they really don't. In fact, the left brain understanding all of this can even enhance creativity if used correctly. It makes me wonder about all of the world-famous buildings of the modern world. Could phi be a large factor in what makes them stand out? Let's move on to our next sequence, which is called Fibonacci. Now, the Fibonacci sequence is life's way of creating the golden mean. Allow me to explain. This sequence is continually made from adding the previous number to the current. 1 and 1 is 2. 2 and 1 is 3. 3 and 2 is 5. 5 and 3 is 8. You can see how it continues. Now, what most people don't know about Fibonacci is that it actually continually strives closer to the 5 ratio. By dividing the current number into the last, you can see this happening. 1 into 1 is 1. Well, that's not at all. But even closer. Continuing with that, it's 1.6, and then 1.625, 1.61534, 1.61048, and so on. It continually oscillates
I was able to check on my phone. We got some buffering in there, but I don't know how long that's going to last. So I think at 2 hours, we'll let it go there and give you good men and if there are any women lurking right now, a chance to, get a better connection and enjoy your Saturday night learning something better. But that 5 will go a long way. And thank you for praying with me early. I also pray that you go get a great night of sleep. And Lord willing, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Flat Earth Nation. It is a Flat Earth Nation. Mudflood was Armageddon. I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I'm trying to prove I have your best interest at heart. And hallelujah, aho.